So we're going to talk about some important things here that is going to be, I hope, immediately relevant, but also maybe intriguing enough for you to follow up with more of this. And what I would like to posit to you is that we have these different levels of being able to see the world. And it's kind of similar. I mean, there's lots of different ways to describe it. One is a ladder. There's rungs on a ladder, and the higher you go on the ladder, the more that you can see. Another way to look at it is concentric circles. And so if you are, in the center, you're only going to be focused right here. But if you're one ring out, then you can focus on this and the center. And if you're on a ring out, you can do this, this, and this, you see. And so there's a way that the more expansive you go, the more you're able to see. But whatever you want to talk, however you want to understand that, we call them in the traditional, we might call them energy centers. And the energy centers are particular nodal points in your energy field.
I remember that. I think, have we talked about this?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, like throat.
Yes,
Gut. Yeah.
Nodal points where it's related to our capacity to view ourselves, our community, and how we understand and experience love, how we practice love in an incarnated way, how we balance it all out, and how we open ourselves out even to more love, you see. And so it all kind of comes together. And one doesn't normally jump to blissed out states of just, units of consciousness. Now, you can have these states. Sometimes it's done by, let's say, psychedelics, or you might have some kind of meditation, or some people have near-death experiences and that thing. But usually what happens is that when we exit and return to our normal life, we're going to normally return back to not the state of non-dual thinking or non-dual experience, but rather to the stage of where we left. And so it's important to understand what our stage is. A stage is kind of more of a more permanent type of energy center or bandwidth of consciousness. You could think of it like a radio dial. What bandwidth are you on? And our goal is to slowly move into greater metanoia. This idea of the heart mind expanding so that we can see more expansively or higher up the ladder, whichever works for you. And so traditionally, these have been called the chakras or the energy centers. But they have a lot to do with as the anchored self and floating self. So that's also why I'm bringing it in. Because and you remember we talked about also at one point, there's 5 stages of learning how to continue this metanoia, this growth. And that is, and I'll repeat them later too, so you don't remember them, but it's know yourself, accept yourself, forgive, balance, and then open yourself up more to love. So these also correspond to the energy centers. And it's cyclical. So just because you get one, you go through the cycle, then this all feeds back into know yourself. See, they're all connected. So here's the thing. The floating self, the false self, its purview, its energetic location, its bandwidth of consciousness is appropriately, that floating self is not the bad self. It's not. It is just a phenomenon that we all have. And we have to have a floating self, damn it. You have to have a way to understand yourself. Who are you? This is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a part of the incarnative process. But we also need to learn how to, I call it vortexing the personality. It's like streamlining the personality aligning it, reconfiguring it, defragmentizing it. I don't care which term you use, but getting it so that there's an efficiency that therefore the energy that's coming through you is streamlined enough so that it goes all the way through and you become a crystallized channel of love and light here. Like that's sort of the goal, right?
Yeah.
The first three chakras, the lower triad, is the purview of the floating self, and it's responsible for basically three things. These three things are not bad. They are dangerous if that becomes the only goals that we have. And these three things are power, prestige, and possessions. Power, prestige, and possessions. The three P's, you can think of it, in terms of the floating self. And the first energy center, like when you get an experience that happens to you, the first energy center that sort of measures or processes that catalyst is going to be, am I going to survive this? Right? The second one is, and this is now we're moving to the orange ray center, which is located, about 3 fingers below the navel. That one is going to be related to who am I? What's my identity? What are my ways to understand myself? Who am I that survived? There is an I here that survived, and who is that? And this is the beginning differentiation between the I and the me. Myself and I. It's the same, but there's a subtle difference there. It's like I hurt myself. You hurt me. But is the me and the I the same? Or sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. So there's all these kinds of ways that you start to think, wow, I do have a sense of who I am, but I'm not my body. But I'm not, maybe I should say it this way. I am my body, but I'm not only my body. I am my emotions, but I'm not only my emotions, you see? So then what are you if you're not your emotions? You know what I mean? Like there's always a transcendent quality to us that goes all the way into divinity itself, the very nature of the creator, our deepest DNA, spiritual DNA is divine. Now, so the second energy center is who am I? And the third energy center is who am I in community? Who am I in my formal roles? Who am I as an American? Who am I as in my case, a white cisgender male American? Who am I in all these things? Who am I, a Texan? You know what I mean? In these concentric circles, some are formalized, some are informal. They do get thrown out. They're just very expansive. Now notice that all of them feed back into each other. Who are we as a people? Are we going to survive? And then who are we as a people? What is our identity? And then who are we as a people in the global context? You see, like all of these just keep feeding into each other. So the more that you get a sense of who you are, you're also strengthening your survival energy center. And do you see how these all feed in?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're concentric circles in themselves. Think about, if we're going to say the energy center 1, 2, 3, so the red ray, the orange ray, and the yellow ray, if we're going to do that, then think of it this way. The red ray can be circle 1. The orange ray is both 1 and 2. So now draw a circle around 1 and 2. The yellow ray, or who we are in community, is circle 1, circle 2, and then a circle 3 around all that. And do you see how they're all working together?
Yeah.
Informing each other? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Simultaneous. Okay. But here's the deal, is that in terms of the false self system or the floating self system, is that most of us will spend most of our life until we don't, until we awaken a little bit more, we will spend it within the realm of the lower chakras. Because our experience of ourselves and our culture and all of this is unfortunately informed mostly by this phenomenon called bellicosity. And bellicosity is a particular word that's important. It means an attitude towards aggressiveness or desire to, a fear of being infringed upon, a fear of being possessed. I'm not talking about demonic possession or something, but a fear of being like violated or having violence done to me, whether aggressive or passive aggressive, or a desire to be aggressive and scapegoat and point fingers and whatnot, you see. And all of that has to do with the first three chakras. It's power, prestige, and possessions at the individual level and at the larger macro level. Okay. And because that is the overarching spirit in the air, the zeitgeist, the global zeitgeist, the human zeitgeist that's been this way for maybe since the beginning, we don't know reality outside of that. But we do know that it exists, and we can experience reality from a more expanded place that doesn't exclude the floating self, but rather it includes it and transcends. You see? Yeah. And that's what we're into right now, because that's how you get into your anchored self from a more permanent state, more permanent stage. Remember the stage and state differences. So the more permanent stage. Okay. Now here's what I'd like to say to you, because you brought up, like, I want to bring Christ into things. But Christ ain't in that when I'm acting this way, or when I'm hating on myself there, or when I'm pissed off at him or her or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's how you feel. What I'm going to invite you to consider is that Christ can't not be inside you. Christ is always there, regardless. Yes. Yeah. Conceptually, you don't know gnosisly. Yeah. Gnosis means lived experiential knowledge. You may have states of consciousness where you're like, yep, Christ is there, but your permanent stage is not there yet. And it will be. It will be, okay? If you want it to be, it will be. It's not that Christ is not there, but you awaken to Christ's presence, and you're learning to be present to presence is a spiritual discipline, and we're going to talk about that, because that's how you do it. So I'd like you to now understand that the particular, let's say, energy center that we might say is the indwelling presence of the Logos, the infinite creator, God, whatever term you want to use. It has its incomingness, its dwelling place is in the heart. Okay, because that's the center. So think of the center as the font of all things, and then it just kind of comes and then bleeds 360 into different, kind of like a balloon blowing out, but there's a center to infinity. There's a center to everything. There's a center to every being, and that's the heart. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Now, so there's Christ. And what I'm saying here from this energy center perspective is that when we are ensconced within our lower chakra triads and power, prestige, and possession, that's the name of the game, that's the goal of that, and it's our floating self, then we are simply not standing upon the rung of the ladder where the Christ energy is. But the Christ energy is not ever not there. It's just that we're not standing at the ladder. And you have to activate that center. So once you activate it, it becomes your dwelling place too, in a more permanent way. Yeah. And here's the interesting thing about that. There's only one way. There's only one way to get there.
What is it?
You ready?
Yeah.
Surrender.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah. There's you can't will it. You can't will yourself into the heart. You can't will yourself into unitive consciousness or love. You can't will it. You can desire it, but you can't force it to happen, if you follow me. So what ends up happening is the way into the heart at a permanent level, that is more or less permanent. And this would be more or less permanent dwelling in the anchored self. Even though you have forays into the floating self, when you're in that the anchored self, you end up using the floating self to do good in the world, but your permanent home is in the anchored self, in the heart. And how that happens is, as I talked about earlier, is acceptance, because it's to know yourself, and you have to know yourself. Remember, the first step is to know yourself in all your brokenness. But you're never going to be able to need to surrender unless you get to a point it's like, oh my God, am I spending all my time in the floating self? Am I ever not in my floating self? And that's when it dawns on us that no matter even our best intentions until now, most of even how we've helped love or given is always a mixed bag.
Yeah.
You know, there's always a lot of me in there, and like conditional loving, and boy, I'm not as loving as I thought I was. You know, that kind of thing. And what I'm saying is that acceptance, that second stage, is actually you coming to a place of fully accepting that, and it's terror maybe, or anxiety ridden, or whatever it is, but also in its freedom. Because when you've hit, quote, rock bottom, there's only one place to go, is up. Because there's a freedom in, well, got nothing to lose now.
Yeah.
My story up until now has been a mixed bag, so I'm going to fully accept that. Do you see how it's both freeing and even as you're feeling the pain?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so this is you being on, let's say, your metaphorical crucifixion. I'm on the cross of my inability to love completely and fully. Because even when I thought I was doing it, and I was dang sure I was doing it back then, I realize now
It's very controlled.
it was controlled in order to control. In some ways, if you're really looking at it, there's some elements that we love, maybe to be liked better, maybe, who knows? Now, some of it's going to be free and a gift, but it's not 100%, So can we accept that? And when we can, that's the surrender. That's the being on the cross. That is the dying on the cross. And then being in the tomb, to use the Jesus Christ metaphor of being in the tomb after being, pulled off the cross, and, having a moment of a season in our life, a liminal space of like, what do I do with all of this knowledge now? And at that point, that's a grace. It's called the dark night of the soul. It's a grace, though. It is. Where we just sit in this, and the only thing that we are asked to do by Spirit at that point is our yes. Our yes for something new to be born inside of us. A new way to see the world, a consciousness that brings us into unity and union. This mystery of union and unity is our yes. So it's kind of the archetypal, Mary, when Mary was visited by Gabriel, and this is going to be done, and do you want this? And Mary, her yes was important to birth the Christ consciousness. So our yes, but it can only be a true yes, a free yes, when we've gotten to the point where we know we need that. Because we faced our floating selves games, and we realize that in the name of winning, we've actually lost. We're shooting ourselves, But here's the cool thing: is when you've reached that point, you realize there's no need for shame. In fact, when you've reached that place of yes, I'm willing to bear the burden of my brokenness, but also my great dignity as a child of God, there is a profound joy and peace that is no longer going to be about us. And this is where we move in. That's when we move into the heart. And from there, all of a sudden, we see the world, we see ourselves, we see our other selves, whomever they are. We see creation as extensions of a unified fabric of being, a unified field of consciousness that is always transcendent, but is not other than us either. That's that weird, not fully one, not two, but both one and two at the same time. And so when we get into the heart chakra, the purview there is acceptance. Yeah. And that includes the circle around one, the circle around 1 and 2, you know, and so now
like it's not getting rid of,
Nope, so it's the fourth energy center is 1, 2, 3, 4 all around, making that one circle. And it's all feeding into each other. So now you have an immediate catalyst that happens. Let's say somebody hurts your feelings. It's going to go all the way up. All of the energy centers are all going to be talking with each other, blah, 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 you know. And you're going to have all these kinds of feelings. But if your permanent stage at that point more is in your heart, you're going to immediately move it into the purview of, I'm accepting this. I'm going to love it. Loving it, not like, oh, I'm so happy, warm and fuzzies, not that. But love it in the sense of, this is reality. I don't want anything else than reality. I'm going to fully embrace this reality here as my pain. And then you move it a little higher to understanding of, yeah, and I'm seeing myself holistically. No wonder why that hurt. You know, that hurt because it was a mean thing, but I have this and this in my past, and that's a sensitive spot for me. And I may never get over that. That's okay. I'm going to accept that too. So I understand why that hurt. And you know what? That person might have been going through something too. Yeah. And maybe I know it. Maybe I don't. But I can already see that he or she never would have said that if they were in their heart. You understand? So it's processed all the way up into the heart. You're holding it all together. And then... So
that's good. Like,
yes.
Able to get to that point. Okay.
That's what you want, because that's the anchored self.
Yeah.
That's the first layer of the anchored self,
you
see. And then when it's in the heart, this is a spaciousness where you can hold paradoxes together. The lower triad cannot hold paradoxes together. Just can't. But the higher chakras, but the heart can. And this is where you hold together, I am... limited in my understanding of myself, and I will always be. This is not the bandwidth of consciousness, let's say, of understanding. I'm always learning. I'll learn until the day I die, you know. And I am also whole. But there's an aspect of me right now that is it's a shard of the divinity. It is pure, unadulterated divine. As God as it can get, you see. And both of those are true at the same time. Can you hold that together? That, you know, the traditional, let's say, Christian way to intuit this is both human and divine. You know, putting both of those together and holding them together. Once you get to the heart center, it moves. Then immediately you have access to the higher center, the blue ray, the throat chakra. And this is the center where you can take all of your acceptance and love and understanding that you're holding it all together, all the catalysts together in the love and understanding lens of the world, and then you can do something about it. So the blue ray is the ray of your co-creativity. Now you get to co-create wholeness out there, you know, and you do it because you've processed your own brokenness, your own floating self's games. You don't get rid of it. You don't demonize it. You don't say, I wish I didn't have it. You accept it. And by accepting it, you can forgive it. And that is the purview of the blue ray, the throat, is forgiving. And what I mean by forgiving is and there's lots of different ways to do this, but one great way is to say, I will never get some things right. And boy, do I have a debt to pay for this. I am so, But you know what? There is a way that I can forgive myself because I'm human. And to be human is not a bad thing. In fact, it's the very point. Like divinity wanted to learn what it was like to be human. Like that's who you are, is a spiritual being trying to have a human experience. there's a reason why we have a limited perspective, and that's part of the great blessing.
Yeah.
Because it gives us an opportunity, it gives God an opportunity through us to learn what love is when it's a choice, not a mandate. You know, because if you never separated from God, if that umbilical cord never separated, then to love is not a choice. Like the angels don't have a choice, they have to love.
Yeah.
But you and I get to choose that and how we do it, you see. And that is a freedom that humans get to enjoy, but it's God in us, through us, doing it. And that gives greater glory to God because God is experiencing God's self through us. Yeah. Now, forgiving means I'm going to hold myself with the full dignity that I actually am. I know that my floating self has games, and I've done them, but I'm also a whole person. I'm a daughter of God. I'm a son of God. I am a living shard of the infinite Creator. You see, and that's who I really am. And so the things that I've broken and are broken, or say struggling or cracked in me, I'm just gonna forgive myself, and I'm asking the infinite Creator God inside me to give me this grace to give myself this forgiveness. And then we could also ask for forgiveness. You see, because there's always a transcendent reality. So not only do we have to forgive ourselves, but we are also asking the transcendent reality, which isn't different than us, but it's bigger than us, to forgive us. So the path, as Richard Rohr says, the path to your anchored self and the path to God is the same path. If you can forgive yourself, God can forgive you. If God can forgive you, you can forgive yourself. There's like an infinity sign on the, you know what I mean? Yeah. It kind of goes there. And once you feel that, you know, and this is it's at once a use of your will. I'm willing. I am at this point giving myself forgiveness, and I'm giving other people that. But it's also an affective thing. It's a phenomenological thing. You feel it. It's an experience of the bonds of karma, or the bonds of the debts or the past. Is just cut. They don't exist if there's a new movement into this stage of consciousness that we're talking about. And it's not just now that you're free of the floating self. It's an inclusion of the. You feel that?
Yeah. Yeah, because that was interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking because you mentioned how it's like, we're never going to be free of it. It's like we minister.
Well, you don't want to.
Like, yeah.
I mean, it's. Can you drive without a motor?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You want that, because that is the constant way to give us more ways to understand ourselves more. Do you remember the know, the accept? It goes back to know, and all the catalysts feed in all of these things. Yeah. So now we know ourselves, we accept ourselves, we're forgiving ourselves, we're forgiving others, and then we move into the higher level, the higher area of the floating self, the deeper, maybe you might say. I'm sorry, the anchored self. The anchored self is the balance, seeking balance. And balance there's lots of different ways to understand balance, but one great way to understand it is if you need to say you're sorry to somebody, you'll do it without needing them to say I'm sorry too. Even if it's 90% your fault and it's 10% mine, I will ask your forgiveness. And I'm not going to say, yeah, but. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm going to find a way in which I was wrong. Yeah. And I'm going to own that because I want to keep my side of the street clean. But it also might mean that I need to set boundaries. It might mean I need to talk to my family about some things that's not comfortable. But I'm not going to do it from the position of the power, prestige, and possessions. Yeah. I'm not going to do it according to the game of the floating self, although most of us do, if we're not aware. But when we're in those situations and we start getting triggered and the pain is there and we're immediately processing in real time, all the way into the heart. I'm accepting that I'm hurting. I'm accepting that all these other people are hurting too. We're hurt people, all of that. I'm accepting all of that. I'm forgiving it. It's like a constant font of just acceptance and forgiveness, all of it. And from that position, I'm also going to speak a kind of truth that is free from manipulation and control, and honor dignity, even if it lays down rather clear boundaries. And that's an art form, do you see? And at that point, you're not intrinsically tied to whether you win or lose. That the success is actually defined more that you spoke from your place of integrity. Integrity meaning all the pieces are connected and integrated, which is what that means. You can change.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the blue ray, you have the capacity more and more to realize things do shift. That any kind of rigidity is a wrong thing to move into. What was true last year may not necessarily be true anymore, and I need to honor that too. Yeah. Why? Because you're always going to be in your floating. The dance of the floating self, anchored self, is not like, I'm moving from 1 to 2, and then back to 1, then to 2. No, it's 1, 2, and then 3, 4, and then it's a constant, if you will, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So you moving 3 steps forward into the anchored self, and that feels great, but then maybe something happens and you're hurt. So then that feels like 2 steps back. And then again, you launch into the anchored self because of a new expansion going through know yourself, accept yourself, forgive yourself, find balance and all that. And you end up moving so that maybe 6 months from now, you're 2 steps back. If you were to line up where you started to the level of where you're at now, it's 5 miles difference.
Yeah.
Even though in the 2 steps back, you might feel like, I've not even started yet.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is called metanoia.
Yeah.
It's the larger increasing of heart mind into greater and greater love and honesty, being able to speak from this harmonized view that takes all things into perspective. And then finally we move into the place of I think I might have missed that. Balance is the purview of the 6th chakra, is up here. So the blue ray, the throat chakra, that's the one we forgive. Yeah, and we put into action in the world that which we want, and that we're planting seeds of wholeness everywhere.
So for that one, for like you keep saying, like the word action. Like what is that? Like, is that just like vocalizing it?
Well, it's embodying it. I don't care.
Okay.
Whatever you do, it's an embodiment. Because if acceptance that you're feeling for yourself, and feeling for others, if that never moves beyond concept or even experience inside yourself, if it's not put into some sort of loving service in an intentional way, then you'll lose it. Because the cosmic law of responsibility demands that whatever is given as an experience has to be incarnated and embodied in some way. Yeah. So you have to give that. But that's the purview of the blue ray. But then the balancing is the purview of the 6th ray, the indigo ray up here. And this is where you balance all things. If you need to set boundaries, you do that. If you need to say you're sorry, you do that. You learn how to have a balanced view of yourself. And weirdly, your emotions become more balanced. Huh. So what might have hurt your feelings last month, all of a sudden you're in this position and you just realize at the end of the day, it's like, oh, snap, that did happen. Why didn't I react? Am I in danger of, transforming your... You understand what I'm saying? But it's almost like it happens, the healing is recognized almost secondarily, because it's like you're just enjoying a larger way to be in the world. And then lastly, it's the crown chakra. This is sort of the overview. So this is the 7th circle that encompasses 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6. All of that is now encompassed into this one. And that is the purview of opening ourselves up to more and more love. So remember, there's always a layer of transcendence. That's all of those things that we've experienced plus the infinite more. There's always the transcendent layer to this mystery of union and unity. So we open ourselves up more, and it's our yes, our Mary's yes. Yes, I want more. And slowly over time, we become that which we worship. We become that which we desire to be. We become that which we have always been, which is the Christ.
Yeah.
You become that, and then so that would be you know, make me an instrument of your peace, where you become the crystallized instrument, you know, God's pen that's writing a love letter to the world, and it's like your will and God's will are aligned, but it's not because you're not feeling the pricks and pins of certain things. It's because you are going to have a well-honed practice of survival and who am I, and then who am I in the community, and acceptance, and I'm forgiving all of this, and I'm balancing, and then I'm accepting more love, and it's all happening all at the same time, and you have an agency in that.